Ioanna, thank you for joining. Yeah, floor is yours. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this conference and the interesting discussions you've been having today. And it's a great honor to be able to present on the Mayor of London's initiative around post-construction monitoring. So my name is Ioanna Mytilinaiou. I'm part of the climate change mitigation team at the Greater London Authority. So I work for the Mayor of London and I lead on the BSIN initiative. So today I intend to walk you through what we call in London the BSIN policy. I will give you a bit of the background of the policy, the purpose, the development of the approach, and I'll also briefly touch on the BSIN framework and as an opportunity also talk a bit about the London building stock model. So starting off with the policy's background, the Mayor has some of the most ambitious plans in the world to tackle climate change, and he has declared a climate emergency, and in line with the London Environment Strategy has set a very ambitious target for London to be net zero carbon by 2030. The Mayor's London Environment Strategy is one of the first city plans to be published and to be compliant with the highest aspirations and ambitions of the Paris Agreement. And we all know that new developments have a very important role to play in pushing this agenda forward and driving the net zero carbon agenda. Actually, all the requirements around new developments can be found in the London plan. So yeah, going back to the draft London plan. So the role of the London plan is pivotal in new developments and in delivering carbon savings. And this is because the Mayor of London has his most powers around planning permissions. This is one of the challenges that we usually face, the fact that the Mayor doesn't have all the powers he would like to deliver on his environmental commitments. And that's why we're really active on our lobbying agenda and on our government asks as well. And we keep pushing the UK government to step up and actually adopt London targets on a national level, targets like the net zero carbon target, tackling embodied carbon emissions and understanding in-use performance. So going back to the role of new developments on all of that, we all know that to successfully reduce carbon emissions from new developments, we need to fully understand the actual in-use energy performance of those buildings. But currently, the tools that we have available in hand only provide us with an indication of the theoretical performance of buildings. These are tools like the UK building regulations or energy performance certificates. So in order to bridge that gap between design and real life operation, we have introduced a new policy in our new London plan, which is the BSIN policy. And this is part of our energy hierarchy. So just to give you a bit of context in terms of the London plan and the energy hierarchy, every new development that submits an application in London is required to follow the energy hierarchy. The first step is the B-Lean, so it's a requirement to reduce energy demand through fabric improvements or energy efficiency improvements. The second step is the Be Clean, so it's all about supplying heat in a low carbon manner. The Be Green asks for maximization of renewable energy generation on site. And finally, the new step we've introduced is the Be Seen, that requires all new developments to monitor and report on their energy performance for at least 5 years post-construction via an online portal. The policy is applicable to all major applications in London, which essentially means anything more than 1,000 square meters, roughly, in terms of non-domestic space, and anything more than 10 units in terms of residential. So it covers quite a big amount of the applications coming forward in London. So there are many aspects to the purpose of the policy. It's about ensuring compliance with the net zero carbon standard, assessing the scale of performance gap, as I said, and trying to bridge that, ensuring that buildings perform in line with expectations, understanding the actual energy and carbon performance of new buildings, which will also be a key factor in achieving net zero carbon London. It's of course about raising awareness over building performance for both developers but also occupants, establishing ongoing monitoring as good practice, and finally through the data that we will be receiving, having the potential to inform our own future policy through the development of our own benchmarks. So in brief, the BCN approach has been developed through extensive stakeholder engagement, including workshops and roundtable discussions we've held with key large developers in London, organizations and London boroughs and corporations that are doing some pioneer work around post-construction monitoring, energy management companies. And we've used all those discussions to, first of all, identify potential challenges and limitations with the approaches that are currently out there, understand the current metering arrangements and costs. We try to determine any technical issues that could inhibit the process. And we also received very valuable feedback on our original proposed monitoring indicators that I will show you towards the end of the presentation. We've also done extensive background research of existing frameworks that are currently out there, monitoring and reporting frameworks, and a very in-depth optioneering appraisal about which methods are the best to go forward with. So
Ioanna,
yes.
Sorry for interruption. I guess maybe you have a window that is open just in front of your slides of presentation.
Let me see.
A great square area for someone.
Is that better now? I think it just popped up. Is it better now? Can you see me all right? Can you see the slides okay?
Not yet, but I don't know, maybe a technical issue. If you don't mind, maybe we will share your presentation with all participants later so
Definitely.
that they can find back all the content, because there is much interest on your messages.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Move on. Sorry for interruption.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'm more than happy for you to share all the slides and answer any questions, of course. Great. So on the back of all this work, we have developed the BCN framework, which includes the BCN Energy Monitoring Guidance and the BCN portal. Both Verco and UCL have been really instrumental in assisting us with the development of the framework. So in terms of the guidance, this is a publicly available document that sets out the requirements to comply with the BCN policy. We published the guidance roughly 6 months ago, even before the formal adoption of the London plan, to allow applicants to familiarize themselves with the process and start encouraging them to apply the policy. In terms of the portal, actually, the portal currently is the reporting spreadsheet that you can hopefully see on your right-hand side, but if not, don't worry too much, you'll get all those slides. This is a spreadsheet that allows applicants to upload their data, all the data required through the guidance to the GLA. And we're currently also developing the actual online portal, which will be an additional layer on the London building stock model. And the intention is for us to present the key energy and carbon performance indicators that we will be collecting through this whole process. So, having mentioned the London building stock model, I think it's important to say that this is a tool that was developed by the Mayor of London and UCL. It is a model that has data on every domestic and non-domestic building and premise in the capital, and it includes data such as the typology of the building, the age, the area, but also the predicted energy usage. It is an excellent tool, a very useful tool, both for us and local authorities to try and identify the worst performing buildings in London and try and increase their energy efficiency through available programs, either at a national or a regional level. And of course, at the end of the day, tackle the ever-ending problem of fuel poverty. So this is a very, very useful tool for us. And the BSIN portal will sit on top of the London Building Stock model as a separate layer for all new buildings. Just going back to the process and responsibilities and the guidance, in the document we've set out the process, the different milestones under which we ask applicants to provide us with their energy performance estimates. This is at the planning stage, at the S-build stage, where the majority of the design has been finalized, and finally in use and 5 years post-construction. And we have also assigned different responsible parties for its different milestone that we expect them to provide the data to us. Just touching on the performance indicators. So the information we are collecting and will be asking applicants to provide, first of all, is some basic contextual data. So the location, the typology of buildings being put forward for a certain application, areas, etc. Information around the building energy use, so actual gas or electricity consumption on site, whether there's any connection to a local district heating network, the associated carbon emissions, how much renewable energy is being generated on site, and also some key plant parameters that we're really interested on that have to do mostly with communal heating systems. So, for instance, the distribution losses of a communal heating system, the efficiencies achieved by the heating equipment, the heat pump or the boiler, whether there's any energy storage on site, etc. So before I close off, I think it's quite important to just touch a bit on the enforcement mechanisms that we have in London and our next steps. In terms of enforcement, as I mentioned in the first few slides, the majority of our powers lie with the planning stage. So that's where we try to raise awareness as much as possible of our policy, of our BSIN policy, by asking applicants to familiarize themselves with the requirements of the BSIN guidance. That's the stage as well where we ask developers to provide us with a commitment that the development will be designed to enable post-construction monitoring through the appropriate metering equipment, and that all these indicators that are set out in our guidance will be reported to the GLA's portal. And finally, it's very, very important for us to ensure that the relevant BSIN legal wording is actually included in the legal agreement that is signed between the applicant and the local authority when planning permission is being given on a development. And that basically is the main enforcement mechanism that ties in developers to provide us with the data as time goes by. It goes without saying that developing both the policy and the approach has had massive challenges, and this is mostly because this is pretty much uncharted territory. It hasn't been done at that scale. So one of those challenges, for instance, was the residential collection of data, and that's one of the main areas that we're planning to look into a bit more detail in the next few months. We will also be finalizing our BSIN portal, as I mentioned. We're considering further ways in which to engage our stakeholder group and to keep them in the loop with developments of the policy. And of course, we have in mind as well maybe some potential pilot projects that could help overcome certain sticking points in the entire process. So that's more or less it for me. Hopefully, this has given you a good insight into what we're doing in London around energy performance and in use monitoring.